welcome back to the Empowered Resilient Woman podcast, a podcast that supports all women on the journey to becoming their most resilient self in life and in business. I'm your host, Kimberly Smith. Today, we are talking about the roller coaster of change and embracing some of the more, let's say, unpleasant emotions that go along with it. So, regardless of whether we are going through change that might be unexpected or even positive change, right? We're going to focus on positive change specifically because with negative change, there's so many different emotions going on. But I really want to focus on the positive change aspect because I think that these emotions are oftentimes neglected when we're talking about positive change in our lives. We're focusing on all of the good things, right? And the fact is that there's a lot of tough emotions with any type of change. And even with positive change, it's uncomfortable. And so we're going to talk about discomfort, disorientation, and grief. And how do we embrace all of those feelings and just get through it? How do we ride the wave of change in life so that we can become more resilient? There's just a lot of unexpected things that come when we are shifting our life, right? And discomfort is honestly a sign that we are shedding some of our old ways, old versions of ourselves, and we're evolving, right? Sometimes it's mentally, emotionally, and even physically painful to evolve, which is what I think we're all really trying to do, especially if you're here listening. I mean, you're certainly interested in becoming your best self or evolving into your highest self, whatever you want to call it. And with all of that change, there's natural discomfort and disorientation. Disorientation comes from not really recognizing that new version of who we are. And to me, the grief that comes with all of this, which we're going to talk about as well, is a mixture of sadness for what we're leaving behind and, of course, fear for the uncertain future ahead. It's really important to address these tough emotions, right? To not only foster our personal growth, but to speed up the process, to be honest. When we deny how we're feeling, when we keep ourselves in resistance, it's so important to address these emotions, to not only foster the personal growth and development that you're looking for, but also to speed up the process. When we deny how we're feeling, we actually keep ourselves in resistance. And you know what that means. I've said it. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Whatever we resist persists. The more we resist something, the longer it's going to continue and the more stuck we're going to feel, which is, of course, not what we're going here for. It's not a good look. So let's first talk a little bit about the nature of change, right? I mean, any type of change means that our reality is shifting. Things often will break down first, right? Things will kind of go wrong, right? Maybe we are laid off from a job. Maybe the person that we were in a relationship tells us that they don't want to be with us anymore. Or maybe somebody that we really liked, just doesn't work out in terms of a friendship or something like that. Or maybe there's other things that are kind of collapsing around you. But often it is that breakdown that happens first in order to clear a path for a new foundation to be built. Human beings are meant to evolve. We are not really intended to stay the same, right? And that's where some of our frustration really comes from. We think that we're just going to get to this place in life where we just coast and we're cool and we're happy. And yeah, there's certainly those plateaus. There's certainly something to be said for being content. And I am a huge advocate of learning to enjoy where you are. You don't always have to be in growth mode, but we also are not meant to stay the same. So creating positive change in our lives, it takes courage because we're going against everything that we've known and we're choosing to leave our comfort zone and venture into uncharted territory, right? This is crucial to our personal development and our progression on the path to enlightenment. I mean, that's what I'm all about. And because change is really how we learn, that's also how we reach the next level within ourselves, within our career, within our relationships. We have to ignite and initiate something new. And learning while we're trying these new things and seeking these new experiences, that's what gives us purpose and joy. That's what adds to our daily, satisfaction. So it isn't, all in vain, that's for sure. Change can really be uncomfortable and unsettling for a lot of reasons. I mean, how could it not be? Even positive change that includes good things that bring value into our lives require us to make trade-offs. And notice how I'm not saying sacrifices. This is a change in the language that I've really, taken on over the last couple of years. And just even as I've made sense of the change that I've gone through in different times in my life, where I really thought, man, I am sacrificing so much of myself. And that really shouldn't be the case, right? You should be making trade-offs. And what we're trading the known for the unknown. And although there's value in that, it's certainly a trigger to our nervous system. It certainly is going to make us feel unsafe in the beginning, very vulnerable. And it creates a lot of mental and emotional stress. It stirs up all these undesirable emotions. So, I've talked about change throughout different times in my life. And, it wasn't easy for me early on. Early on in my career, I had a lot of unfavorable experiences when it came to employers that led to a lot of disappointment and a lot of self-doubt. I had a major relocation. I got married, bought a house, switched jobs, relocated again. I mean, on and on, right? And you throw a baby in there and building a house and renting a house in a different state, all in just the span of a couple years. And of course, my foundation was shook, and it really had me disconnected from who I was, from my purpose. And I often was questioning myself, right? I wasn't being my authentic self day to day. It was super uncomfortable. And that discomfort was a sign that I needed to shift my mindset on many, many things in life, as well as my approach to how I was going to make it through tough times of change or times of change in general, or any type of transition, because transitions are just a part of the journey. So something that isn't talked about enough on this path of self-discovery is how damn uncomfortable it is, right? You see all of these people like self-love journey and, living my best life and, doing all these great things, which is awesome. But there's a lot of discomfort in those new challenges. And it's truly necessary to understand that discomfort and make peace with it amongst the process of change and growth. We've all heard the term growing pains, right? If you grew up in the 90s like me, you also know the TV show, it's kind of good, right? After school special style. Growing pains are real. Literally, young children can experience muscular pains as they physically grow. If you have kids and, teething, right? When those babies are cutting their first teeth, losing their baby teeth, getting adult teeth, it freaking hurts. They cry a lot, right? They're irritable. There is physical pain that comes with growth. It's the same thing when we're trying to evolve as a person. We might have physical symptoms like gut or stomach issues such as IBS. We might also experience ailments or injuries in certain parts of our body that are associated with certain chakras. But most of our growing pains and discomfort as adults is actually mental and emotional discomfort. And the sources of this discomfort that we feel during this time of change are things that we're trying to create positive change with, right? Like it's the discomfort of leaving the job. It's the discomfort around changing our career, around ending that relationship or relocating or any other big shift. There's also the discomfort that comes with, the unexpected change, such as losing a loved one, being part of a layoff, a breakup, or a friendship that just ended unexpectedly. And you have to remember that all of this discomfort has a purpose. It's the discomfort that challenges us to change the way we see ourselves, other people, the world around us, and do something different. This actually goes along with a psychological theory called cognitive dissonance theory. And this is developed by psychologist Leon Festinger. And this theory actually says that when you hold beliefs and attitudes that conflict with your desires and your goals in life and what you're trying to achieve, you have to be willing to shift your beliefs and change your behaviors as a solution to relieve that discomfort, right? That is the solution, is seeing things from a new perspective, shifting the way you think about things. Discomfort also arises when we are pushed out of our comfort zone and into the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD, right? Like we always hear about our comfort zone, but what's beyond the comfort zone? This is a concept that was actually developed by psychologist Lev Vygotsky. And it says that we experience discomfort and stress in the zone between what we can do and what we cannot do, even with the assistance from others. The ZPD is where we push ourselves beyond our limits. It's where we deploy greater resources. It's where we get creative. It's where we learn new skills. It's where we level the fuck up, right? So not all stress and discomfort is bad. And we've got to learn how to cope with it. In order to build a healthy, adaptable, flexible, and resilient nervous system, we have to experience some stressors, some challenges, even failures. It's when you intentionally expose yourself to stressors and challenges, this is kind of like exposure therapy, your nervous system is going to learn to function more effectively under these conditions, but only if you're able to recover, okay? That means that you have to be able to rest and recover after that stress activation. If you're constantly pushing yourself beyond your limits without giving yourself time to rest and recover, it's going to cause damage to your vagus nerve, or what's called your vagal brake. And this controls your sympathetic and parasympathetic responses in your nervous system. It's when your body knows, hey, we got to get into action, right? It's that fight or flight or freeze. So are we going to run from this? Are we going to fight it? Are we not threatened and we can relax? And if that mechanism, that vagal brake, if that does not know what to do because it's always in activation mode, it just stays on. And then you're never able to actually truly relax and recover. And that is what leads to burnout. So in general, discomfort is a catalyst, right? And this is a mindset shift. Can we see the discomfort that we're going through as a good sign, right? You know, you may have heard that adage that God had to make you uncomfortable so that you would move. We eventually are going to get frustrated when we're uncomfortable, and then we will shift. Then we will do the work. So remember that frustration is transformative. I often think about this term that they talk about in yoga, or actually a phrase, I guess, mantra, whatever you want to call it. And it says, you know, and they often say this when we're moving into poses that might feel a little tight or a little uncomfortable. And it's find comfort in the discomfort. This doesn't mean push yourself beyond your limits and burn yourself out. It means challenge yourself. It means be okay with just slight discomfort, right? And breathe through it. That's what you do in yoga. And I feel like this mantra is just so powerful. It's so true. And it reminds me in challenging situations. I'm pretty sure I thought the same phrase when I was in labor to breathe and be patient. You know, when we push ourselves outside our comfort zone, when we align our behaviors with our values, when we learn to cope with the stressors and the challenges in life in new ways, we are truly finding the comfort in the discomfort. And only then we can actually rise, right? We can do bigger things. We can go beyond our limits. We can build greater and overall resilience mentally, emotionally, and physically. Discomfort, in my mind, you know, if I'm thinking about things chronologically, leads to disorientation, the other emotion that we're going to talk about, or the second emotion. And they're not the same. You know, we think about discomfort, disorientation, they sound very similar. And when we're experiencing any change in our life, of course it's going to be uncomfortable, but we're also going to be disoriented. We're going to feel disoriented. So what does that mean? It means that you are confronting and shifting your thoughts and beliefs and pushing yourself in new ways. And you're literally changing the shape of your brain. You're building all of these new synapses, right? So you're not going to feel like you are literally becoming a new version of yourself. So that disorientation, it looks like feeling confused, feeling like you've lost yourself maybe, or you've lost your sense of direction, like you don't know what to do next, or you don't know what the next step is. And that's really scary. And you feel like you can't even think clearly because your mind is fucking all over the place. And that is disorientation. Certainly disorientation is also uncomfortable, and there's discomfort that results from that as well. All of this really triggers, again, our nervous system, the feelings of unsafety. It leads to anxiety. It can lead to depression and burnout. And so that's why we need to support ourselves in these different phases while we're experiencing these different emotions of discomfort and then now disorientation. And how do we do that? We do that by slowing down as much as possible. In this disorientation phase, you're kind of in the void, right? And that the void is, I talk about with my clients and, my friends and all of that as we're going through some of these really important life shifts and transitions. Your old life is falling away, right? And that's scary. A lot of your unknown is kind of, crumbling in a way. I experienced this when I was going through, my career crisis and my marriage was, taking a turn for the worse. My entire reality as I knew it was, shifting away from me. And I really didn't know what was coming next. And it's in that space, that void where your new identity hasn't fully taken shape yet. Right. And that's disorienting because you don't know who you are. You don't know where you're going, but it is part of the process. So grounding yourself, remembering that it's all temporary, that everything that you're experiencing, all the discomfort and all the tough emotions, they are not going to last forever. And to be honest, it's really a good sign that things don't feel normal, because that means you are on the path of change and that you are moving forward and that you are moving to a new level. We are never the same people when we get to the other side of whatever transition or change we are going through. Disorientation is natural. It's to be expected. And on the other side of that change, you will be better. You're going to be wiser. You're going to be more resilient. So feeling lost is part of the process. We just have to let it happen. And this is where we practice surrender. One of the toughest things in life is to let go. This is also a practice of non-resistance, is really just letting things be, surrendering to what is. This is when we also want to be in flow, when you can try and trust deeply that you don't need to feel super comfortable during this time, that everything is working out, that you don't need to know all of the answers at this very juncture, and yet still everything is always coming together in your favor, right? It's always coming together in your favor because you have that faith, because you are surrendering to a power that's greater than you. It's not easy to let go of these previous versions of who we were and all of the things that we identified with. Letting go is a skill. Nobody teaches this. I mean, add it to the list of shit they don't teach you in school to prepare you for life. And so we have to teach ourselves. With that letting go comes probably one of the toughest emotions out there that certainly doesn't get the airtime that it deserves. And that is grief. And I couldn't possibly, let me just preface this before I go into this next segment, is that I cannot possibly explain grief or any emotion in its entirety, because we are all individuals. We all perceive things in different and unique ways. And so, take what you need, leave what you don't for all of this, but especially when it comes to grief, because it is such a layered emotion. This is my attempt is not to explain it in its entirety. This is just a piece of it. We usually learn about grief when we lose someone we love, either to a breakup or to death. And that's one of the reasons why it's not a super talked about emotion, is because people don't really think about happy things when they're going through it. Or when grief comes to mind, they think about unpleasant things. It's not a really happy emotion, but it is an emotion that we're going to have to face in our life. And grief comes with losing all things, lots of things. We can grieve the loss of jobs, opportunities, anything that's familiar, right? We can grieve just anything that really we wished happened but didn't. It's just the process. It's part of the process of change. Grief comes with letting go of all of our old ways and old identities, even though we often struggle to love ourselves, right? In real time, in real life, and express that daily. You only know the version of yourself who you've been. So with all of the internal chaos that you may feel, all the stress, the struggle, all of your toxic traits, right? We all have them. That person, her, she, they are familiar. She's all you have. And you're scared of what will happen if you let her go. So absolutely, grief is going to come. Change is embedded in the universal cycle of life and death. So with death, we often see this rebirth. And in order for something new to be born, something always has to die. That's what nature tells us. And one of the best examples of this is the 4 seasons, right? So bear with me while I, give you a little visualization and kind of go down this little rabbit hole that, during springtime, everything's new. The plants are blooming and sprouting and the flowers are blossoming. It's gorgeous, right? Summer, the landscapes are in their full expression, full bloom. Temperatures are at their peak. And then autumn comes, right? And things start to slow down. The leaves change color. They fall to the ground. Seeds then, are kind of scattered and they're planted for when they're going to bloom the following spring. Animals collect their food and they stock up their little dens, and winter comes and the days are short and dark and cold. Animals are hibernating, plants wither and they die. It's kind of sad, right? When we think about the landscape, the real landscape, and how that, is a great representation of the landscape of life. Many of us experience sadness and grief during these seasonal changes, right? But then spring comes again and things are reborn and the cycle begins again. New life comes into the world. And so this cycle of change always comes with conflicting emotions. And it's cyclical. It goes around and around. And we see that often in our own life with change and the letting go process and letting things die and letting things wither away. But it's not without purpose, right? Much like all of the other things, discomfort and disorientation, it's for a higher purpose. We can bet on that for sure. Because after all of that, usually comes this period of renewed life, of rebirth. And alongside, just following all of those sad emotions comes excitement and beauty and joy. And we see that in the seasons as well. While it's kind of sad to see, each season go and pass. And, I think just as an adult too, it hits you with how quickly time goes by. And that's another layer of grief, right? But there's this juxtaposition, right, is really the point that I'm trying to make, that grief, while it's hard, while it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable, while it requires that we let go, it's also really beautiful if we can see that, right? I've lost some really dear friends along this journey. And while, of course, I hate that they had to leave, quite a few of them were also experiencing a lot of pain. And I didn't see it at first. And of course, it took time to reach that level of acceptance and a new mindset. But I actually feel like, they're at peace. And it was a beautiful thing that they departed when they did, because it really stopped their future suffering. Grief is complex. If you do research, you're going to find it's got 5 stages, or 5 well-known stages. The first stage is denial and isolation. And that is discomfort and disorientation, right? The second stage, anger, super uncomfortable, discomfort. Third stage, bargaining. This is the disorientation that we feel, because we're trying to outsmart the system, or outsmart the change or the letting go process. We're trying to see, well, can I do it this way? Well, what if I do this instead? We're trying to regain control. The stage 4 is depression. That's certainly uncomfortable, certainly a phase where we are questioning who we are and we're experiencing being disoriented. The 5th stage is acceptance. And that is the surrender that we talk about. That is the faith that we talk about. That is forward progress. That is where you make forward progress, is when you can reach that level of acceptance and surrender to it and have faith that everything's working out. The perfect solutions are in motion, and you can just live. You can relax. And, even using the example of, my friends who have departed, I remember during my grieving process, I remember particularly with one of my close friends who left this world too soon. I didn't realize actually that I was in this deep depression. And I was just really going through the motions for many months. I would just go to work, go to school, come home, and I'd sleep. And that's it. And I wasn't really present. I wasn't really experiencing the full spectrum of who I was, or joy or happiness anymore. And it was kind of like a switch went off, and not to say this is how it's going to happen, because I think that there's a lot of work that we can do to speed up the process, right? That's what we're talking about today. But it just all clicked. And I was able to let go of all the things that I couldn't control in that situation and accept what had transpired. And then I could really focus on moving forward in my own life and living life in honor of that person. So, stages 1 through 4 are really part of resistance. They keep us in resistance. They keep us in this prolonged state of not moving forward, of discomfort and disorientation. And coming back to what we talked about in the beginning of our episode, the law of resistance, that this is a universal law, spiritual law, that says whatever we resist is going to persist. And, most people don't move fluidly from one stage of grief to the next. Oftentimes we actually waffle back and forth between the different stages, right? We might feel, anger at first. Maybe that's the first stage that we experience. Then we go into the first stage of denial and isolation. Then we're in depression. We can do it in any order. I really think that's how I've experienced grief. It's not a one size fits all. And that's also why grief feels like it comes in waves, because it's not a linear process, and change isn't either. Just when we think we've processed things, right? It comes up again. There's emotional residue that we have to continue to work through and make peace with. And then we're also reaching a new layer of acceptance when we get through it. So, once we can accept whatever it is that's happened or is happening, then we can do the work that we need to do to get to the other side, right? But if we're unable to let go of the past and take responsibility for our future, we're going to really keep ourselves stuck for way longer than we need to, right? We need to accept everything. We need to shift our mindset. We need to let go of the past And that is us taking responsibility for the future ahead. That is having the control that we've needed. So it took me a long time to grieve the end of my marriage. Some days I still feel grief for, what was lost and what will never be and all the dreams that kind of disintegrated. But that doesn't mean that I regret my decision, right? So, grief can just stay with you. You don't have to feel bad about that. You don't have to feel bad about processing things again and again. And just because you're grieving something and doesn't mean that you haven't let go. You certainly have, right? Like, just because I feel those feelings sometimes and feel those waves of grief for, my marriage ending doesn't mean that I regret my decision. It doesn't mean that I long for reconciliation or that I don't love my life right now. I certainly do. I absolutely do. I know I made the right choice. We can feel a lot of conflicting things simultaneously, right? So you can still grieve whatever you've lost and also be in acceptance. and you can still be moving forward, even feeling grief. So, how do we ride this roller coaster of change? How do we embrace the discomfort, the disorientation, and the grief that inevitably comes with change of any kind, especially positive change, but certainly, any negative or unexpected as well? My best tips for you are self-compassion. This might seem simple, but most of us could really use some practice with being nice to ourselves. It's difficult when we feel like we aren't where we want to be in life, or when we have a terrible inner dialogue that beats us up all the time. We just need to practice self-kindness all the time. We need to practice self-love all the time. And we do this through positive daily habits, through self-care and mindset work that help us change that inner dialogue to be more supportive, to be more loving. And if you can do this, if you can have compassion with yourself every day, not just during the tough times, right? It's going to go a long way when you need it the most, right? That's why we should be focusing on this every single day, is in preparation of the tough stuff. Second tip is patience. And man, this is a super hard one, right? And we talk about the 3 pillars of life and mindset in my head, actually, being patience, humility, and surrender. And patience is consistently one that we all struggle with, myself included. It's not easy to wait. We want to control the timing of so many things, but it is impossible to control the timing of life. That is God's work. No matter what your spiritual beliefs are, no matter what your religious denomination, that is God's work. So as long as we are doing what we can, everything that we are in control of, then we just need to trust in divine timing and practice patience. And that is faith. Sometimes when something isn't happening for us, it could mean that there is something else that we personally need to do, that something that maybe we've neglected or that we've avoided doing. Sometimes it means that we need to do less, right? Sometimes it means that we just need to chill the hell out and relax and wait. And it's in that time that we're actually being given grace to prepare for what's coming so that we can receive what we've been waiting for. But waiting, of course, it can cause discomfort, disorientation, and grief, and all the things that we've been talking about. A couple things to help you expand your patience are distracting yourself with something positive and productive. Shift gears to another task instead of obsessing over it, whatever it is that you're waiting on. Educate yourself, do some self-guided learning, focus on other goals that can help you stop watching the clock when it comes to whatever it is that you're waiting on. Meditation, prayer, those are things that can ground you in your faith. That, the perfect solutions, they're on the way. And when in doubt, self-care, do something kind for yourself, steal away some mini moments during the day to be good to yourself. And it is true that maybe you just need to do less. Maybe you just need to take a break. Another great way to ground and support yourself as you ride the roller coaster of change is to do some self-reflection. We can really get caught up in our heads and we get into these cycles of spinning and rumination, and it's so destructive. It can easily go down a really terrible path just in terms of self-talk and the way we're thinking about situations and catastrophizing. So aim to understand your emotions, especially all of the emotions that, are coming up at any particular time. It's so empowering. So get it out of your head, brain dump it. Journaling is a great way to gain that clarity of how you're feeling and create a deeper connection to yourself and your desires. Sometimes we don't know how we're feeling until we really stop to ask ourselves that question. And sometimes that's what helps us along the process, is releasing those emotions, getting them out of our head. And then we can really kind of see them from a different perspective. We can do that mindset shift. Once we get it out, we're like, oh man, when I read this back, actually, and maybe you just need a good cry. I know a lot of women that talk about how they hate crying or they want to hold all their tears in. Let it rip, baby. Let it rip. I cry a lot, and not because I'm a sad person. I'm a very, very joyful person. Most people will say I'm super high energy. If you know me personally, you know that I bring the light, but I honor my emotions by not stuffing them away, by giving myself space to let them out. Right. And it's very cleansing. It's very therapeutic. And certainly when we hold those emotions in, a lot of other things can really make things worse. That could be a whole episode on its own. So I hope this episode, you pulled off some gems, some nuggets of wisdom, and just some things to bring you comfort when things are uncomfortable, when you're feeling disoriented, when you're in, whatever stage of grief you might be in. It's so normal. All of these emotions are signs that you're on the right path. So don't give up. Be good to yourself. And that's really, takes this episode to a wrap. So thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to take a screenshot, share it on social media, and tag me. There's so many people out there that need support, and we need to do our part in sharing resources. And this podcast is really one of them. So if there's somebody that that's in a life transition or going through a challenging time, perhaps they need to hear this, right? Perhaps this will really be the thing to help them come back to themselves, to be honest, right? So send to a friend if you think they'd enjoy it. And just know that I appreciate you all so much. I appreciate you being here. I'm sending you love, and I will see you in the next episode. Keep shining, and let's chat soon.